Welcome to our second Montessori Europe webinar. We continue to explore issues of social justice and tolerance and how these are promoted in our Montessori practice through the planes of development. I would like to welcome colleagues and friends from the Montessori community, Judith Cunningham from the Montessori Model of United Nations, and Heide Van Staden, a practitioner, trainer, and a leader of a school from almost birth to 18 in Pretoria, South Africa. I would also like to ask Gwendolyn Bellinger, our colleague, who ensures that the technicalities are working, to remind us of the ground rules for today's session.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Lovely to see you all, looking forward to this evening's webinar. Those of us watching us on Facebook, welcome to you there as well. If you could all keep your microphones on mute, because this ensures that your background noise doesn't interfere with the speakers. So please keep your microphones on mute. If you would like to ask a question, then click on the little chat icon at the bottom of your page and pop your question into the chat box. And either Barbara or myself will make sure that the question is put to the speakers when there is a good moment. If you are following us on Facebook, live on Facebook, then please pop your question into the comments box. I will be keeping an eye on Facebook as well. So if you see me doing this, that's why. And again, I will pop those questions to Barbara in case there is anything there which can help the discussion along.
Thank you so much, Gwendolyn. Tonight's webinar is supported by a PowerPoint, and so please would you share it with us, Gwendolyn, and we will begin with voices of young people from Heidi's school.
Right conduct means to lead by example. Nelson Mandela once said, "A winner is a dreamer who never gives up."
The 17 Global Sustainable Goals for 2030 focus on our main issues such as poverty or climate change. But first we need to sort out inequality within our society.
The main thing for us is we don't realize how much we affect the kids.
The 17 Global Sustainable Goals for 2030 are a way to help people with future problems.
It's not my place to disrespect somebody's religion or whether or not they're vegetarian. What I can do is be kind.
We need to find as many people to help us in our journey.
Try and show them that, so that it doesn't matter about your race, your gender, anything, your background, who you are as a human being, everyone is equal.
And just because someone is not the same as you, they don't come from the same background, they don't believe in the same religion, they still deserve to have equal opportunities.
I for one think to make the world a better place, we need to start by educating people. Number one, greedy people.
Do we have an equal society?
No, not at all, because there's still some people that have strong beliefs that others do not deserve that equal opportunity. Peace is trying to be obtained, but there are some bumps.
No, I don't think we live in an equal society, because I see everything as equal, and so one life can't be more important than the other.
When it comes to change, you must have acceptance instead of judgment.
Like little things of just being kind, and I know we like always talk about being kind, but like really being kind, like truly, is like acceptance. I feel like when you're young, you learn a lot from what you see and hear.
I'm more thinking for future generations.
Do you think we as a human race can fight racism?
I don't think we'll ever get rid of it. There will always be people out there who will be racist, because it is a thing that is taught.
Fairness of education, I think, is a big deal, because if some students were given the chance at a better education, I think that they could
I'm sorry that we had a slight technical hitch. The film was prepared at a very, very short notice, but I hope it gives you the feeling of the generations to whom we are serving, and that you are happy to appreciate the diverse voices of the young people who have experienced Montessori education, often from birth. And the whole purpose of encouraging tolerance really means that we need to, as educators, start from the very, very young children, because we all agree that education begins from birth. So we need to begin to look at the human values which we appreciate and value as we go forward. And for me, when I had to choose the human values, I felt that the right conduct, peace, truth, love, and non-violence are the principles that are deeply rooted in the Montessori approach, and are the values which we try to encourage as we work with the children from the very youngest age. Of course, there are many elements to each one of the values, and we need some of these characteristics are naturally within our lives. We are born, for example, with the capacity for empathy, but we need to give the children the conditions in an environment to nurture that empathy and give them opportunity to express it. May I please have the next slide, Gwendolyn? Thank you. So when I began to think about how we, for example, nurture empathy and what it really means for young children to join the nursery class or the children's house, I was taken back to the absorbent mind and to Montessori's expressions about the cohesion of the social unit. Because when children join us, they are often egocentric and find it quite difficult to consider the needs of others. But as they are supported by the sensitive teachers, and as they are supported by people who understand and value their uniqueness, they are able to gradually develop social skills. And so grace and courtesy is very much valued in the children's house, as is the opportunity to begin to think of other children. After all, when we encourage children to return the materials back to the shelf, we always remind them that we are doing it so that they are ready for another child to use. So the social awareness is fostered from very, very early on. And Montessori herself demonstrated this social awareness in emerging children's capacity to help each other. In her reflections on the beginnings of the first children's house, she talks about the children opening the children's house for the Argentinian ambassador. And she mentions the fact that for her, that was a perfect example of children's capacity to think of the needs of others and behave as a group, proud of what they have to offer and what they do in their nursery. Please, may I have the next slide? So she talks about the solidarity that the children felt, and she names solidarity as a gift of nature. So it is a unique human quality that we all have the potential to feel. And I sense that in recent months, we have had an opportunity to revisit our thoughts about solidarity and what it really means to be a human being. And we have had an opportunity to think about what we all contribute to society and appreciate the work of those who went far beyond their duty to ensure that people remain well, or that society could function. From the child's point of view, the importance of solidarity comes from emerging empathy. It also means that the environment needs to offer surroundings and conditions which will nurture the child and which will give the child trust and respect to develop as an individual whilst being nurtured in the social aspects of their life. It needs to be enabling, and we need to remember that we are role models for those children. So the foundations of social justice needs to be experienced by the children before they can express themselves. So the child's physical independence gradually develops into spiritual independence. And as they enter the second plane of development, they begin to appreciate the value of interdependence. And then, of course, in adolescence, they need to have a voice that will be heard and will be valued and considered as important element of them emerging as social beings and contributors to society. So at this point, as we are considering the gifts that are given to the child as the child progresses to the second plane, I will hand over to Judith, who will look at the benefits, what the second plane of development has to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. It certainly clearly laid down the foundation in the child's earliest experiences as they develop love, empathy, respect, attachment, respect for others, respect for the environment. So now taking a broad sweep at how solidarity and peace is built across a developmental perspective, let's look at the elementary or the second plane, and then Heide will provide for us the third plane. And before I start, let me just say, Heide, what a wonderful wisdom your students shared with us. Montessori spoke often about how the children are our leaders and that we have much to learn from them. Certainly they well represent these values that we're talking about today. So now in this second plane of development, Montessori observed a metamorphosis in the child. And she said there were three overarching characteristics: the need to escape the closed environment, the passage of the mind to the abstract, and a birth in him of a moral sense. This, she said, should be the basis for our elementary education. So when you take these components together, the ability to reason, the development of community, the development of imagination, and a moral sense, they really place the child in a critical period for the development of social justice. Next slide, please. And here you'll see a group of Montessori elementary students who were preparing for a meal that they were using to raise funds for a homeless shelter. So Montessori had to develop her program for the elementary child based on these developmental interests. Next slide, please. And what she did was to create cosmic education. She said, in this period, there was this great curiosity that can almost not be satiated, and it will in fact last a lifetime. The laws governing the universe can be made interesting and wonderful to the child, more interesting even than things in themselves. And he begins to ask, what am I? What is the task of man in this wonderful universe? Do we merely live here for ourselves, or is there something more for us to do? Why do we struggle and fight? What is good and evil? And where will it all end? So to answer these great questions, these cosmic questions of the elementary child, Montessori created cosmic curriculum. Next slide, please. And this curriculum, I'm going to share 5 big ideas that are embedded into the program. The 5 big ideas are understanding of human needs, the interdependency of life and the earth, the interrelatedness of all subjects, the unity of humanity, and the gratitude of all the people who've come before us and have formed the basis for our culture. So let's take a look at each of these big ideas. Next slide, please. I'm sure this is a slide or a chart that you all well recognize, the Fundamental Needs of People chart that provides a paradigm that people all share the same needs. But how they satisfy their needs depends upon where they are, what geographic place, what time period, what socioeconomic status. What unites us is that we all share these needs, and therefore we are more alike than different. And these human needs really can be seen as the right to the fulfillment of basic human rights. So human needs and human rights go hand in hand. Next slide, please. So as I said, human rights are really based on the fulfillment of human needs. Next slide. Moving along to the interdependency chart. This chart reveals the interrelationship that exists between the living and the non-living aspects of the world. In Education for a New World, Montessori pointed out that animals do not eat just to satisfy themselves, but to fulfill a mission prescribed to them in the interest of the harmony of creation. And this can only be achieved by collaboration. And so Montessori said every component of our world has a cosmic task to perform. And this cosmic task may be conscious, or for most of the living world, it's unconscious, but it's carried out in a day-to-day actions that each of us contributes to the maintenance and the balance and harmony of all. Next slide. This framework of the interdependency chart is an incredibly powerful way of studying subjects. A great example, of course, is climate change and how it demonstrates this interdependency of the living and the non-living world. Thank you. Next slide. So Maria Montessori, throughout her life, stood up for the right of people to an education. And she challenged the barriers that were based on mental and physical conditions. As we all know, that the first children she worked with were so-called feeble-minded. And then she turned her attention to the children at the first Casa dei Bambini, which were essentially the urban poor. And so even, and moving on then, she wanted to make sure that socioeconomic status was not a barrier to education, nor would age be a barrier, nor would be gender. She, of course, suffered from many obstacles in her own education because she was a female. Nor should the barrier be your ethnicity. So her great work demonstrates how she stood up for the rights of all for the power of education. Next slide, please. And so Montessori recognized that human rights really are the foundation of solidarity and social justice. Next slide. The next slide demonstrates the great lessons and how, for the elementary program, all the great subjects are introduced in a story manner or narrative that excites the imagination and the intellect of the child, and also interweaves how all subjects are interrelated, that in fact you cannot study one in isolation as if it were a silo, but all subjects are interlinked and interdependent. Next slide. Gwendolyn, the next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, go back. I didn't see you changed it. This is the Great River Chart, and it has a direct aim of presenting the great lesson about the human body. And so again, it's a story about how the systems of the human body are powerful when they work together, when they work in solidarity, but when working alone, they are weak. However, when all of the systems work in synchronization, you have the full functioning of the human body. And when they work in cooperation, they make the body very strong. This same chart has been used as a metaphor for human unity. That, next slide, please. Montessori, in a famous quote, next slide. Go forward. Yes, Montessori said that humanity is an organic unity that is yet being born. Next slide. And she called this La Nazione Unica, or the one nation. She said, we are one world. We breathe the same air. We drink the same water. We feel the same emotions. Truly, we are one race, the human race. Next slide. So taken all together, cosmic education provokes these cosmic questions to the elementary child. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What is my contribution to the preservation and betterment of the world? What, in fact, is my cosmic task? Next slide. And finally, Maria Montessori was a supporter of the League of Nations and a supporter of the United Nations. She was actually a member of UNESCO and a contributor to the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child. She told UNESCO, if the world would listen to the children, they would hear new innovative solutions to the world's problems. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Heidi, to tell us about the adolescent period.
Thank you, Judith. So before I start this, just to recap a little bit from what Barbara and Judith have both said, I think it's so vital to just remember that we have adolescents that are coming to us having already experienced the first and second plane of development. And so much indirect preparation has happened during those times that gives us the adolescent that walks into our classroom. We know that Montessori called these individual social newborns. I changed the quotes to add the woman, just to make it a bit more inclusive. But we know that these adolescents come to us as a social newborn. They're vulnerable, it's a vulnerable age group. And we're really given a second chance during this time to make a difference to the child building their character. This is the time when we need the right adult working with the children, because it takes a very special kind of adult to be able to work with the adolescent. An adult who can be empathetic, who can listen to them, who takes a step back and really shows the children that they matter, that they have a voice, that they can speak. And it was really interesting to do the video with our children late last week and hear their voices. And the passion with which they spoke was just amazing. And at our Monday morning meeting yesterday, they continued the conversation. They wanted to keep talking about this idea of social justice, and they wanted to find out more about why I was speaking and what will it mean and when can we do it again. So this has sparked great conversations amongst them, and I think that it gives them an opportunity to see that their voice does matter, and that they are important, and that they have use, that there is something that they can do. And while they're figuring out who they are and what they're going to be and placing themselves in the world that we're living in now, they're trying to unravel all these things. Where do they stand on gender equality? In our country, in African culture, gender equality is a big question. It's something that needs a lot of mind shifting. And so our children are struggling with this idea of the gender equality. Black Lives Matter. Is our situation in South Africa, for example, the same as it is in other countries? Are we all just human beings, or is there a difference? And so all these subtleties are things that they're still unraveling, still trying to work on. And I think that if we look to what the children's, what our human tendencies are and how the children are expressing themselves as adolescents, they have this tendency to want to communicate. We know that it's one of our greatest human tendencies. And so when they start this communication, they want to keep speaking. And this talking is what's building their identity. And it's giving them a sense of where they can be useful in the world and where they can make a difference. We can do the next slide, please. Okay, so this quote is from the book From Childhood to Adolescence. And Montessori wrote, "The awareness of one's own talents and the many possibilities of their adaptation, the awareness of one's usefulness, the feeling that one can help humanity in various ways, fill the heart with noble confidence." And I think that this is where the children start finding hope, is where they feel that they can make a difference, and where we are able to valorize the child. Montessori spoke about us as the adults valorizing the adolescent. So just as the little ones go through the process of normalization, our adolescents need valorization, and they need independence in order for that valorization to happen. And they need to be given the opportunity to express themselves independently. Okay? So obviously still within the guidance of those very special adults that work with the adolescents, but they need to have that voice. Their imaginations are developing. They're seeing themselves as bigger than they are and yet smaller than they are. There's always this duality with the adolescent. You know, they want to be so big and yet they're so small. And that vulnerability is what we need to be aware of, okay, when we're dealing with these issues with the adolescent. We need to remember that they're still young in the sense, and yet if you listen to what they spoke about in the video, they're wise in a sense as well. And this is why we need to have their voice. I think it's also important that we remember, as I said just now, the indirect preparation that the children have had from little. They learned to look after their environment. Okay? They learned the microcosm of the preschool was special just for those children in that space. And as they grew older through elementary, they started going out. Okay? They started seeing the world a little bit bigger than just their classroom. And we then move on with the adolescents to looking at even bigger issues. The community becomes wider. Okay? And now, obviously, with the internet, we've got a global community where they're starting to see that they can make more of a difference. And that voice is very important, because it speaks to another human tendency, which is order. And the fact that these children need order in their world. They need to know where they fit in. They're trying to make sense of it. And once they can understand how the order of the world works, they're going to make a difference later on. The next slide, please. So we do see children at this age starting to become very aware of the fact that they can start putting their voice out there. It is at this age that the sensitive period that ought to develop feelings of justice and personal dignity occurs. And we see that this happens with the children when they're given the opportunity to express themselves. And I think a lot of this speaks to Montessori's idea of peace education as well, the idea that she had that we can have a peaceful world if we start with the children, and if we start educating the children in peace, and if we start looking for solutions that are driven with peace at the end of the day. One of the girls that spoke on the video spoke about kindness, and that sparked a lot of conversation. That's, you know, we can just be kind. That's one way to start the ball rolling. And it's just an interesting, almost simple example of how one small difference that we make will make that snowball effect. And the next slide, please. Oh, my last slide. So when I looked at the values that we had discussed before creating this talk, the right conduct, peace, truth, love, non-violence, these were also issues that I spoke to the children about, and they've committed to looking at these values, first obviously within their own sphere, their own context of the school, but then taking it out there and looking further into the community to see where they can make a difference. And being social newborns, there's still there's trepidation. They're not quite sure where to go. They're not quite sure how to make the difference, but they know they want to make a difference. And I think as the adults, if we can give them the opportunities to find the places where they can make those differences, small, big, it doesn't matter. They need to start seeing them at this stage. And this is where the interdependence of us as human beings is going to come to the fore. The children from preschool have developed the independence, and that's seen them through their elementary years. They've exercised that independence through elementary. Now we need to take this independent adolescent and give them the opportunity to really understand through all those great lessons they've had in elementary, all of the great lessons that Judith spoke about, culminate in this idea that there is an interdependence. And as human beings, we're gregarious. We want to socialize and be with other human beings. We need to teach our children how to be with others, so that, you know, moving forward, they can look at these values of right conduct, of peace, of truth, of love, and non-violence, and take them out there into the world. And that takes me to the end of my slide.
Thank you so very much, Judith and Heidi. We have started with giving the child agency through learning to be physically independent. The idea of I can do it on my own, which they take from the nursery towards the primary education, is very empowering to their sense of self. And of course, then in the elementary school or during the 6 to 12 years, they are really finding about who they are, what is the world all about. They also find an opportunity to begin to experience what it is to give to others, what it is to share, and what it is to contribute. And when they become adolescents, they are finding how to do that individually, yet with the support of the group. In all those journeys, the children and young people need our care. They need to feel that we hold them in mind, that they are unique individuals, irrespective of where they come from. And one of the huge potentials of Montessori education lies in the fact that we share these principles, these values across the whole globe. And I hope as you prepare for the next academic year, you will be able to hold some of these ideas, some of these quotes, and this inspiration from Montessori, and give them to the children with whom you will work next year. We would be very happy to receive questions from the audience or reflections on today's talk. I could see that people loved the connectedness with the adolescent. They loved being reminded about the importance of cosmic education in our classrooms. So please feel free to ask or comment in the chat box. Are there any questions on Facebook, Gwendolyn?
There aren't, but what we could do is maybe play the song, and then people can reflect while they're listening, and if they have any questions, pop them in the chat box and we can take them after the song. What do you think?
That would be really lovely. Judith very kindly provided us with a song which was composed during one of the sessions that she has done working with young people. And once again, they are reminding us of the creative potential of the children when they come to work together.
Let go of prejudices staring us apart. Feed the flame burning in every heart. What we do now changes the future. We've got to remember we are one.
And I guess the city ain't too pretty now that things are so insane, but I hope you can use your brain. I must confess that I can feel lonely, but I know I am not alone, 'cause you're right here with me. You just gotta believe me. You're no longer on your own. Don't feel under the weather. We're all in this together.
Is what I'm doing right or wrong? Not everyone seems to follow along. Thought all we wanted was happiness. People seem to be more interested in their own needs. Maybe we can work this out.
And I guess the city ain't too pretty now that things are so insane, but I hope you can use your brain. I must confess that I can feel lonely, but I know I am not alone, 'cause you're right here with me. You just gotta believe me. You're no longer on your own. Don't feel under the weather. We're all in this together. The city ain't too pretty now that things are so insane, but I hope you can use your brain. I must confess, I miss this whole committee. There's no point in feeling blue together. There is nothing we can do. Me and you, you and me, me and you.
Hey, we're internationally digital, collabing with the brightest colors you could ever vividly imagine. Fueled by passion, watch us take action. Flying high like we got a ride from Aladdin. So long, this is not a slow song. It's a Mario mushroom to make you grow strong. Cliff hanging by one hand, but still I hold on. Sometimes I feel like the hope's gone,
but I know I am not alone, 'cause you're right here with me. You just gotta believe me. You're no longer on your own. Don't feel under the weather. We're all in this together.
always together. We're always together, baby. Always together. We're always together.
Barbara, you need to unmute yourself again. That was the end of the song.
Sorry. Are there, I can't quite see the chat box. Are there
Yes.
any questions apart from comments and reflections?
So Suzanne is saying how we've really left our children with a burden and a real need for immense social change. But yes, that's something that I've certainly feel quite positive listening to you all, and how the Montessori philosophy can guide the children through. And Anna Maria shares that that she loves the idea that we need to empower the teenagers, and this concept of building through the planes on what has gone before. Thank you, Heidi. Yes, I think Anna Maria and I both have teenagers, so that really resonated with us. And beautiful song. Hang on, let me scroll down. A reflection from Zilla. How big the children in the 6 to 9 classroom can think and want to help change, start a protest group. That's fantastic, and they know what they want. Judith, Diana's wondering if we can share the link of the song because it's so beautiful. And then some thank yous, but a lot of praise for the song, Judith, as well.
Wonderful. I'll be happy to send you the link. Well, Heidi, you have the link. I sent it to you.
I have a link in the, yes, yes, I sort of have a link. But
we also have a video of the kids singing it. So I could share that as well.
If you send that to me, I can always email everyone who joined the webinar today, and we can share those things with them.
I just like to share how that song came about. We had to flip from a live face-to-face conference that was to take place in Chicago, and during the time we would do a songwriting workshop, and we always ask students who want to join to apply. And so we had these 4 children who wanted to write a song. They did this all virtually with a professional songwriter that works with MMUN, but it was their words, it was their music, and he put it all together. And it was really about solidarity. So the refrain keeps going through my head about we're all in this together.
Thank you so much, everybody. Lots of food for thought. Thank you for your time. Thank you for engaging with us. Please join us on the 31st of August on Montessori's birthday to look at the roots of the ideas for social justice and solidarity. We will be exploring Montessori's ideas about feminism, her time in India and the birth of the cosmic curriculum, and also the roots of peace education. And please join us also in Montessori Europe. The uniqueness of the organization is in the fact that it is an association for individual Montessori teachers from across Europe and the rest of the world. If you want to join us in other parts of the world, Heidi and her colleagues certainly contributed to the Congress in Dublin last year. And we would very much like to see you in future webinars which we will hold after September, and also in our Congress in Prague, be it face-to-face or virtual, depending on where the COVID journey takes us. Enjoy your summer, and thank you again.